Happy New Year and welcome back to the People's Mirror. In the past 8 days, we have not detailed any episode here at the People's Mirror, and the reason for that is very obvious. It's been days when families have been spending time together, and here at the People's Mirror, we hope that you had a very good Merry Christmas and that your New Year is coming out very prosperously. We want to start by thanking you, our viewers, for our last post here at the People's Mirror, the episode that we did, Looking Within. The engagement in the comment section and the likes was really motivating. It was a pleasure to read your thoughts on what we do, and those thoughts were very, very encouraging. We hope that even in our subsequent episodes, we engage furthermore in the comment section and we read more of your thoughts after we do our episodes. It's also important that we say thank you to the 600 new subscribers who are here, part of the People's Mirror, as a result of that last episode that we did 8 days ago. 600 of you, that is actually a very good number, and we thank you so much for choosing the People's Mirror as the platform for your political commentatorship. If you are joining us for the first time, or maybe a video has crossed onto your feed for the first time from the People's Mirror, then please hit the subscribe button so that into this new year, this can be one of your political commentatorship channels where politics meet reason. Now, with that said, let us delve into some of the issues or some of the political stories that have been made in the course of those 8 days that we have not been recording here at the People's Mirror, that have now formed the foundational statements into 2026 political landscape, just a year and a few months into the major polls in 2027. Now, in politics, there is hardly a holiday. Up to the 30th and 31st of the previous year, political statements were being made, and these political statements were made including in the burial of the late Cyrus Jirongo. From that particular burial itself, we want to put before the mirror certain key political statements that were made, starting by the statements of the fourth President of the Republic of Kenya, that is the President Uhuru Kenyatta, in that particular burial, and what it meant now for 2026 as a training ground and the year of campaign ahead of the major polls next year in 2027 around August. But later on, we'll also take a look at other political statements that were made from the angle of community point of view, where the younger parts or the younger politicians of the community are calling for unity and daring the ground in 2027, while the elder members of this very community that was burying Cyrus Jirongo are holding their bids and are intending to now just contest in the 2032 elections. While that is happening, the younger group are calling for unity, while the older group have to stay in government until 2032. Now, the implications of that we will also put before the mirror. But other than that, we will also put before the mirror the ongoing contest between Governor Wanga and Uhuru Kenyatta when it comes to this section of the ODM party that now has been termed to be the section of the ODM party that is selling the party to Uhuru Kenyatta. This particular group that involves Governor Jirongo, Osotsi, Sifuna, and who in their statements you'd see that read from the same playbook from the fourth President of the Republic of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta, have now been blamed to actually sell the interest of the supporters of the ODM party that alienate their interest or their support to the party as a result of the group to the Uhuru Kenyatta camp. While this is happening, the rest of the camp feel like the broad-based area is where they want to stay. And moving into 2027, they're saying that they would want to stay, but with the new terms, saying that they do not intend to support President William Ruto without terms. But what are the terms? The terms remain that if this particular support needs to go to President William Ruto's camp as a bloc, and these particular leaders offer themselves as the negotiators for that bloc vote in 2027, then Professor Kithure Kindiki should not be in his position come 2027 August. Now, this is very hard decision, but it seems like President William Ruto himself, who was in the Nyanza region during the Christmas period, is now telling the ODM party to be ready as a promise of agreeing to their terms come 2027. So keep it here at the People's Mirror as we delve deep into these statements that we have highlighted to you briefly. Now, let's start to the Uhuru Kenyatta issue. Yesterday, if you took a look at what happened at the Jirongo burial entirely, there were three approaches of speeches that were being made ahead, or were being made around that particular podium. The first group of these speeches, the first part of these speeches, was the tribal attack, where people were asking questions around the death of Jirongo, where others believed strongly that Jirongo did not meet his death through an accident. It got so heavy that there is a talk of a torch that actually was put in Jirongo's coffin to actually light his path of revenge moving forward. But this particular cohort also cited names of certain individuals that now they weren't investigated for the last conversations that they had with Jirongo. Other than heated part of asking questions and seeking for answers around his death, there were also talks of unity of Luya politics ahead of 2027, which also took a very center stage. Then later, there was now the reply, or rather the attacks that were cheered by the president himself, President Uhuru Kenyatta, towards individuals that are seeking to impress in various camps and are doing that at the expense of their own parties. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta is very important to say he did not affiliate himself with any of the calls of investigations or insinuations around the death of Cyrus Jirongo. It seemed like he took it as it is that Cyrus Jirongo died out of an accident, and therefore did not see any need to involve himself with the stories of investigations around Jirongo. But then there's also another angle to it. This could be it. The other angle to it is that if President Uhuru Kenyatta himself insinuated any doubt around the death of Jirongo, then it would pit him against the current administration and of course against the current presidency. It would now show that the former president, who is of course President Uhuru Kenyatta, was in one way or the other dissatisfied with how the current regime runs its, of course, investigations department. And it's very safe for a former president not to in any way show or actually indicate through his actions that he feels that the systems of the current government are underworking, because that way he undermines the authority of the sitting president. And so taking that particular path of not involving himself with matters that are a reserve of the investigation or investigative departments of the state was very statement of the former president. So he said that the late man Cyrus Jirongo alikuwa mtu mwenye si wa kuogopa. He identified him as someone who was brave and could only be compared to a lion. He did a mental picture to the people that were actually attending this particular burial with a person that is hardly 30 years old sitting President Moi down and President Moi listening to him. And he said the influence of Cyrus Jirongo came as a result of his boldness and courage, which he mastered at very younger ages, to the extent that before he was 30 years old, he was already leading the YK92, which was in charge of the youthful part of the youthful vote of President Moi in 1992. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta later admitted that it was Jirongo who actually introduced him to KANU. The effect of this is that you could say now that Jirongo himself, the late man, had a direct hand in making both the fourth and the fifth president of the Republic of Kenya. The fourth being that he introduced President Uhuru Kenyatta to KANU, and KANU was the point where President Uhuru Kenyatta began his political story until he became the president of this country in 2012. But other than that, of course, the story of the current president also stems back to YK92, where he was but just an employee of Cyrus Jirongo. And so the late man that was buried a few days ago is a man who created both the fourth and the fifth president of this republic. Still keeping it on the presidency, President Uhuru Kenyatta identified Cyrus Jirongo as Rais, and he said that he used that word intentionally because Jirongo is one of the presidents that Kenya did not have. Now, this was not a statement made in isolation. Most other speakers who took to the podium in the burial and in the requiem mass of Cyrus Jirongo also hold the idea that Jirongo was a president alongside Raila Odinga that this country did not have, saying that his ideals and his visions for this country was out of this place. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta kept in on Jirongo for a while before now veering his speech from the personality that Jirongo is to democracy that Jirongo stood for. He said that he saw Senator Kaniri alongside other members who are still remaining in Jirongo's party. And this is the point where you'd say that President Uhuru Kenyatta now veered his speech to what he had primarily intended to say. It seemed like in his entire speech, what he primarily had intended to say was on strengthening democracy and was entirely not on eulogizing Jirongo, because this was the bulk of his speech. He said that there is complete need to defend democracy. And at this point, Jirongo was just but a prop in his explanation. He said that there is this need because other people like Cyrus Jirongo the late actually defended democracy. And so you see, here's where we put our comment as the People's Mirror. This is the very playbook. Later on, as we detail for you the statements that were made by Sifuna or Sotsi or Rengo, you'd see that this was the very, very playbook that that particular cohort was reading from. And it was so much that Sifuna preempted, even in his own speech, that it would be said that he's actually in conversations with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and they say that he does not have time. He's never even had time to meet President Uhuru Kenyatta and discuss the fate of the ODM party. Briefly, before we go back to the statements of Uhuru Kenyatta, let us delve a little bit into where this fight is coming from. Currently, the ODM party is divided, with a section feeling that ahead of the 2027 elections, they need to support the broad-based arrangement and stay with Ruto in that particular arrangement to the end and beyond. And another section feeling like this particular decision is not what Baba envisioned, and that the current arrangement with the Ruto only needs to run up to 2027. Now, the cohort that does not support Ruto's bid post 2027 have now been termed to actually be in discussion and in conversation with other sponsors, including President Uhuru Kenyatta IV, whose name now has come out as a sponsor of this particular cohort that says that they want to strengthen democracy in Kenya, but plays or comes out as they are opposing President Ruto's second bid. Now, the cohort that is with President Ruto's second bid and who are advocating very heavily to have the deputy position as part of the arrangement in the 2027 negotiation table blames this particular cohort of Osotsi, Orengo, and Sifuna, who do not identify with the broad-based arrangement, as puppets of President Uhuru Kenyatta. And so Uhuru Kenyatta's statement of strengthening democracy, coming at the time that that was the basis of the statements of Orengo, Sifuna, and Osotsi, just confirmed to this particular group of ODM members who are on the other camp that whatever was always being said, was always being rumored as a possibility, could actually be something coming true. But let's go back to Uhuru's statement. Now, Uhuru said that it took a lot of struggle to create multi-party democracy in Kenya. And so he said that there is need to strengthen these particular democracies. In legacy, he called upon everyone to defend their own party. And he said, while you're defending your party, make sure that hujavunja party ya watu wengine. Now, this is the point that you'd say that politically President Uhuru Kenyatta was now attacking the politics of the current president. And that much is allowed. If it is not within how the government is operating, it's purely on politics, then a former president can make political statements. And so he was calling upon even the president and everyone else to defend their parties and not do that at the expense of other parties, but defend their parties while giving room for other parties to also thrive. And say this is because of how hard it took to fight for democracy and the need for democracy in this particular country. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta went ahead and called upon the Western people to unite. He said that he supports the call to unite. And the call to unite came, of course, from Boni Khalwale. The call to unite also came from Sifuna. Sifuna himself asked, and later on we'll do in an episode that we'll detail for Sifuna, the older members of the Luo community to support his bid in 2027 if they're waiting for their bid in 2032. And Boni Khalwale called for a need to have the Mulembe nation sit together and gear the direction of this country politically in 2027. So President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was a guest in this particular burial, confirmed that he sides with the group of the Western Union that are calling for unity, saying that it is good as a community to come down, sit and negotiate and decide what they would want to become the future of this country moving forward. However, he had a very important caution. He said that this should not be done at the expense of multi-party democracy. And so that much he held, that if it is for multi-party democracy, then this particular decision is okay. But if it is at the expense of multi-party democracy, then he said there is no need to to have that particular unity. So he asked the Luhya people to unite, to come together, negotiate, and give the direction of the country moving forward, bearing in mind that that is to be done in the spirit of democracy. So it was at this point when he was saying that he has seen Kaniri and the likes of other members who are in Jirongo's party present, and that he almost said that he would do everything to strengthen their parties, that two things happened. And so before we go deep into what really happened, and before we make a political commentatorship on the statements of the President of the Republic of Kenya, the fourth one, President Uhuru Kenyatta, let us listen to what he said at that particular part that will necessitate that comment.
Na kutoka wakati huo mimi nimetembea vyama vingine tofauti tofauti, lakini uhusiano wetu haukuharibika. Kwa vile wale ambao wamesimama hapa siku ya leo wakisema ya kwamba kama kuna mtu ambaye alikuwa custodian na kuheshimu multi-party democracy, that was Cyrus Jirongo. Cyrus alijua maana ya demokrasia, maana ya kuheshimu vyama vya kisiasa, maana ya kufanya kazi na watu wa vyama vingine bila kuvunja vyama vyao. He respected the political space that was created in this country with a lot of struggle, that multi-party space. Na kama sisi pia tunataka kumheshimu, wacha pia to respect space hiyo. Tukisema tuko kwa mvumo wa vyama vingi, na kwa kikatiba tunazingatia huo mfumo wa vyama vingi, tuiheshimu pia kwa yale ambayo tunatenda na kufanya, sio kuvunja vyama vya wengine. Tunaelewana? Na ndio tuweze kushirikiana kulingana na sera. Mkishajadili mtaongea na wengine, na tuzingatie mpaka dakika ya mwisho. Mtu akishindwa.
So at that part, the president, former president, the fourth president of the Republic, Uhuru Kenyatta, was just heightening the importance to keep democracy intact. Of course, as I said in the beginning of that part of the analysis, before we played the audio, his main basis was this, that the fight for democracy actually took a toll on the people. And so everything that is being done needs to be done within the democratic space fully, and should not be done at the expense of other parties, but should be done to strengthen democracy and other parties. But later on, as he goes on into this particular speech, President Uhuru Kenyatta now turns his particular attack, or rather his statements, from strengthening democracy to individuals who have had to use other people as guinea pigs to escape the obligation when it comes to themselves actually seeking favors in other political positions. Now, we will detail a comment on it, but first listen to what President Uhuru Kenyatta said.
Hapa sisi tutawasaidia in your party. In your party. Hata tukiambiwa sijui tunaenda kwa zingine, ati nakwambia jameni wa Kenya naona mtu akishindwa njia ya kujipendekeza kule anataka kujipendekeza, lazima atafute mtu aseme unajua watu wanakataa kusikiza kwa sababu ya ule, kwa sababu ya huyu. Toa hiyo fikira mbovu, kwenda ongea na wananchi. Unda na usimamishe chama chako, kuwa na sera zako kama mwanaume, kama Cyrus. Sio kuzunga huko ukitoa mambo ya upuzi ambaye haipeleki nchi pahali. We want a united country. We want a vibrant democracy. And we want the will of the people to be that shall prevail.
That is what he said. So two things can be made or can be commented on that particular part of the presidential speech. One is that he intended almost to say that at an individual capacity rather, he would do whatever it takes to strengthen the parties that exist, of course, to enrich the spirit of democracy. He was using the example of Kaniri being here, saying those who remain within the party, we would. Then he realized that that particular statement would play, into the statements that have been made by this particular cohort of the ODM party that blame him for actually buying the ODM party. And so once he stopped short, he said that within their own party, they need to strengthen themselves. And then he remembered that, of course, there have been statements that have been made towards him concerning, of course, buying the ODM party by the likes of Gladys Wanga and the rest of the cohort that are within the broad-based arrangement of the ODM UDA, and not, of course, the cohort that identifies with the likes of Sifuna. And while he was saying, hata kama tunakuwa blamed kuingilia vitu zingine, now he directly used this particular opportunity at the barrel of Cyrus to address Wanga and the likes of Wanga in that particular party, saying that strengthen your party and do not go and tell the people where you are trying to, of course, identify as a good person politically in front of their faces, that the ground is not responding to the policies because of certain individuals here and there doing 1 or 2, 3. Go and talk to the people and strengthen your party and be a man enough, or rather a woman enough, if this statement was addressed to Gladys Wanga, and start your own party and defend it like Cyrus did. Now, these statements have been taken to be made towards this particular cohort of the ODM party that do not have their own party and rather using the ODM party and the Uhuru story to actually receive support or sympathy from the current ruling government. But it can also be taken out of context or further within the context to address individuals who are present in this particular gathering, including Honorable Musalia Mudavadi himself and Honorable Wetangula. You see, Honorable Wetangula's Ford Kenya lost an election in the MCA position in his own county. You remember we detailed here that Chwele Kabuchai Ward had a Ford Kenya candidate that lost to an independent candidate, irrespective of the dominance of Wetangula in that region politically. And so Wetangula's party currently is weak. It cannot even sustain an MCA position in his own backyard. Other than Wetangula, there is Musalia Mudavadi, who has since now merged his own ANC party into UDA. His ANC party, which was the regional party of the Luhya region for quite some time and had even a potential of relishing a Luhya candidate into the presidential competition in 2027 and beyond, has since now been deformed to be part of the UDA party. And so it does not have a party either. So if he was to go to President William Ruto and actually seek support, or go to President William Ruto to seek favors, and President William Ruto was expecting something to happen in the ground and it doesn't, Mudavadi and Wetangula still fits within the script of President Uhuru Kenyatta of strengthen your own parties. Do not go there asking for favors, and he's saying that the ground is not responding solely because of an individual here and there, yet you have not strengthened your own parties. So the statement of Uhuru Kenyatta could have been a direct response to the current steam that exists between them and Wanga, but other than that, it could also be a response, or rather a challenge to this particular statesmen who are present in the Cyrus Jirongo barrel, who hail from the Luhya region, who do not have their own parties or have weakened their own parties in the spirit of democracy to join the ruling government. So President Uhuru Kenyatta fired those particular shots at the people that were the recipients and say that he might be a president, but ukifinya macho yake, yeye pia ata make sure amefinya macho yako. Now these statements are coming at a time where alignments are being made ahead of 2027. And briefly, towards the end of this episode, is the fact that as we're talking about 2027, we are talking about first, how is the current regime going to solicit the Mount Kenya votes? Rigathi Gachagua is no longer in the conversation, and Kindiki seems like his neck is facing the guillotine very soon. So how will the northern area actually be factored in this particular conversation? Will Waiguru now be asked to solidify support for President William Ruto and be given a ministry? Is the mountain going to actually accept ministry positions if if the position of the deputy presidency is being taken away from them. But the real talk is that if you compare the shrinking backyard of course, Kindiki and Ruku combined in the region where they come from, to an existing political party that has been here for over 20 years and whose mobilizers and negotiators always mobilize and negotiate for this region to vote as a bloc, then you're most likely know where this particular issue or this particular decision is going to tilt towards. And with the statements that were made by President Ruto in the course of this Christmas in places like in Migori, where now he calls upon the ODM party to be tayari, saying that at some time Raila used to say ODM and they used to respond to the tuko tayari, telling them to put the house in order, while he also puts UDA in order and they form government in 2027. Will that now automatically mean that Kindiki is out? Later on in our episode, we will detail that and other statements that were made at Cyrus Jirongo. Keep it the People's Mirror until our next episode.